Vikings, let's win the game.
Vikings fan, you're about to get the answer to why the Vikings felt comfortable taking a risk in drafting Caleb Banks and what today's draft decision is really bringing to this team. And in the middle of all that, a source is revealing that Jonathan Greenard may be heading to the NFC East. That alone can change the way this roster feels. And unfortunately, the final story shifts the entire mood. A Minnesota Vikings legend has passed away at 68 years old, and that hits hard for the history built in purple and gold. Look, this draft pick was not for anyone who likes playing it safe. This was one of those decisions that instantly splits the fan base. Some people applaud the boldness, others step back and start thinking about everything that could go wrong, because what the Vikings did here was swing big, really big. And it wasn't just about talent, it was the full package, including the risk. The name of that bet is Caleb Banks, a massive player, literally, 6'6", nearly 330 pounds. But it's not just size. What stands out is the explosion, the movement, that feeling that he can take over the interior of the line at any moment. There's college tape where he looks like someone who should have gone much earlier in the draft. And then comes the part that gets everyone thinking, the foot. He barely played last season. Just 3 games, serious injury, surgery, then another issue right before the combine. For a player that size, that raises immediate concern. This isn't minor, and even so, the Vikings stepped up and took him at pick 18. That tells you everything about what this team believes. They're not just looking at what he is right now, they're betting on what he can become. And when you hear the internal perspective, you can feel the coaching staff fully bought in. There were visits, meetings, even a coach traveling to his college to evaluate him up close. This wasn't impulse, this was calculated. Very calculated. And that matters because a pick like this can either make the room look brilliant or leave fans asking the same painful question for years. Now here's the real point. This could turn into one of the biggest draft steals in recent memory. Or it could become that pick fans look back on with frustration for years. Because if he stays healthy and fits into Brian Flores' system, everything changes. The defense jumps to another level. Interior dominance shifts games. Pressure up the middle disrupts quarterbacks. Changes reads, changes everything. But if the foot issue lingers, then it gets complicated. Fast. And this is exactly the type of decision that shapes a franchise for years. So tell me, do you love the bold move or does it make you uneasy? I want your take on this, because the next layer shows why Minnesota believed this gamble had more substance than people might think. Quick ask, subscribe to the channel, and jump into the comments. Your voice matters here. When you first look at it from the outside, it feels like a risky gamble. But then behind-the-scenes details start coming out, and the picture changes. Because this wasn't just stepping up and making a random pick. There was a heavy process behind it. And that's where what was said internally really matters. The one who addressed it directly was Kevin O'Connell. He made it clear this decision went through multiple layers. It wasn't just talent evaluation. There was deep medical analysis, conversations with specialists, constant monitoring of recovery. And according to the team, the situation right now is far more positive than many expected. Reports around the league even suggest the player is on track to be fully cleared for football activities in early June. That means right on schedule to be ready for training camp. And that changes the conversation. Because there's a difference between drafting an injured player with uncertainty and drafting one you believe will be ready when it matters most. That is the line Minnesota is walking here, and the Vikings are clearly leaning into that second scenario. O'Connell also highlighted something crucial, system fit. He talked about the excitement from Brian Flores and the defensive line coach. That's not a small detail. When a coaching staff believes like that, development tends to accelerate. And there's another factor that can't be ignored. Roster need. After key changes on the defensive line, the team needed a physical presence inside, someone who doesn't just take up space but can apply pressure. That is where games get changed in today's NFL. And that brings everything back to that incredibly high ceiling. And here's a perspective not everyone is seeing yet. The Vikings don't view this as pure risk. They see opportunity. Like, if not for the injury, this player wouldn't even be available here. And when you look at it that way, it makes sense why they didn't wait for the next pick. Because if you truly believe in the player, you don't gamble with that. Of course, the risk is still there. It doesn't disappear. But it shows the team wasn't reckless. They were aggressive with information in hand. And whether you agree or not, that reflects a different mindset, a franchise pushing beyond the safe route. Still, there's one piece that matters even more than the team's explanation, the player's own words. And that's where this gets even more interesting. And that brings us to the moment where everything gets more personal. Because now, it's not just scouting reports or coach statements. It's the player putting himself out there. And when that happens, you can tell if it's just confidence or something more. Right after being drafted, what stood out was his presence. No hesitation, no generic rookie speech trying to please everyone. Direct, confident, almost challenging anyone who doubts him. That player is Caleb Banks, and the first thing he made clear was simple. He believes he's special, not a figure of speech. He literally called himself one of one, and that's coming from someone fresh out of college, coming off a serious injury. Now, some people might see that as arrogance, but when you look deeper, it starts to make sense. Because despite everything with his foot, he didn't hide from it. He broke down the process, talked about recovery, referenced recent scans, and made it clear he's progressing well, right on track. No signs of setbacks. That kind of confidence matters when the whole conversation around you is risk. And there's one detail that really changes how you see him: mentality. This is a player who played through injury, knowing his foot wasn't right, knowing the risk, and still went out there because he wanted to compete. Wanted to be with his team. That says a lot about how he approaches the game. There were moments where he knew something was wrong and kept going. That's not normal. That's not just physical. That's mindset. At the same time, he also acknowledged he hasn't reached his full potential, that he needs to refine technique, build consistency, understand the pro game better. So it's not empty confidence. There's awareness there too. And in a system like Brian Flores, that combination can be powerful. Because when you mix size, explosiveness, aggression, and willingness to learn, the result can be something special, a player who starts inconsistent and grows into a dominant force. But it all comes down to one thing: health. If his body holds up, the ceiling is massive. If not, all that confidence turns into uncertainty. That is the tension in this pick. So I want to hear from you again. Does that mindset excite you or worry you? Drop your take below, because this one splits opinions fast. And the next situation is not about potential anymore. It could impact the current roster right now. Now the conversation shifts completely, because this is no longer about draft projection or development. This is about roster movement, and the kind that can reshape a team immediately. It started as a rumor, then it grew into stronger speculation, and now there are people treating it like something close to happening behind the scenes. The name at the center of it all is Jonathan Greenard, one of the most important pieces of this defense recently. A player who brings pressure, consistency, and physical presence. But his situation with the team has become complicated because of money. He wants more, a bigger contract. And from his perspective, that makes sense. Production leads to those conversations. But from the team side, the view is different. There's already depth at the position, younger players pushing for opportunities. And that creates the classic dilemma: pay big or reshape the roster. That is not just a salary decision. That is a team-building decision, and that's where things heat up. Reports suggest there are ongoing discussions with the Philadelphia Eagles. This isn't random noise. There's a real framework being discussed. The value is around a second-round pick, possibly in the mid-range. But there's an important detail. Nothing has been finalized yet, and that opens the door to multiple outcomes. The deal could already be structured and just waiting for the right moment during the draft to be announced. It could depend on how the board falls. It could shift if an unexpected player becomes available. But the reality is, his name is out there. And that alone changes the atmosphere. Because when a player of that level enters trade discussions, the locker room feels it. The fans feel it. The entire plan shifts. You don't move a player like that without a clear vision for what comes next. And looking at the situation, it seems like the team is already preparing for that possibility. If this trade happens, it reshapes the defense, it opens opportunities for younger players, redistributes responsibilities, maybe even changes how the team pressures quarterbacks. But there's another side. You lose experience, you lose proven production, and that's never easy to replace. Now imagine that happening at the same time as a high-risk draft pick. That's a near-complete reset of the defensive line, and that's risky. But at the same time, it might be exactly the kind of move that separates an average team from one ready to take a real leap. That's the dangerous part. It can look bold and smart, or it can look like too much change at once. And the next story brings a totally different kind of weight. Not roster weight, but franchise weight. And now, everything changes. This isn't about projections, negotiations, or what happens on the field. This is about history, about respect, about someone who helped build this franchise. And this news hits differently. Doug Martin has passed away at 68 years old, a name that younger fans may not have followed closely, but one that carries real weight within the organization. A first-round pick back in 1980, selected in the top 10 out of Washington, and it didn't take long for him to prove he belonged. 10 seasons wearing purple and gold, 10 years of consistency, strength, and presence on the field. He wasn't always the headline name every week, but he was exactly the kind of player every team needs. Reliable, tough, always there, and teammates remember him that way. They talk about his demeanor, calm but competitive. A quieter leader who led by example. No speeches needed. His play spoke for itself. He had a season leading the league in sacks, another year with high numbers even in a shortened schedule. And across his career, he put up totals that place him among the top defensive players in franchise history. But more than numbers, it's impact. Because when someone spends an entire decade with one team, across different eras, alongside different teammates, they become part of the identity, not just a player, a reference point. And when news like this comes, you pause. You remember that before any analysis, any debate, any expectation for the future, there's a history built by players like him. That's what makes this one hit harder than a normal news item. And that connects directly with those who live and breathe Vikings football. Because being a fan isn't just about now, it's about carrying the past forward. Today is about respect, about remembering, about recognizing what someone like this represents to the franchise. And that changes how you look at everything happening right now. And in the middle of all this, you can feel the Vikings are at one of those defining moments. There's a major gamble being made to reshape the defense, internal confidence being put to the test, a potential departure of a key player shifting the balance of the roster, and at the same time, the franchise's history reminding everyone who built this foundation. None of this is light. None of this is simple. This team is choosing to be aggressive, choosing to take risks, and that can lead to a real leap forward, or come with a price later on. But one thing is clear, they are not standing still. That matters, because in the NFL, standing still usually means falling behind. And when you bring together present and past like this, the responsibility grows even bigger. Now I want to hear from you. Does this direction excite you or concern you? Drop your comment below and share your perspective. Stay tuned. SKOL Vikings, let's go!